Here's a demonstration of typesetting example 9 from the score homework number 2. So this piece is a 12-tone piece. So what the music has is on the bottom staff, we have the 12-tone rows that are used in the music, which are on staff 2 and 3. So I'm going to start by entering the bottom staff, which is the tone row. So I'll type I and P. I don't want to go all the way to the end of the full margin, which is 200. So if you see, the right end is set to 200. So I only want to go 75% of the way, so I'll type 150, enter. So now if you look at the bottom, there's two little arrows at the bottom, which are showing you where the music is going to go. So it's just slightly smaller than the full width. So I'll press start to type the music for the bottom staff. So I'm going to put in a bar line first, and this will be the dashed line that's above in the final notation. But I can't change the position or the dashing in input mode, so we're going to change the style of that bar line in graphical editing. So now I will type in TR for treble clef, and then the pitches. And the pitches, I'm only going to give the pitch and not the accidental. So it's a little bit easier to do it this way, you'll see later. So I'm going to start with B4, and then F, U, and then C, and then I'll go into proximity mode to do the rest. So proximity B, A, F, C up, D, G down, A, D up, E. And then I'll press enter to just make it clearer that I'm entering the second set of 12 notes. So it's optional. The wrapping in this case will be okay, so not too many notes. So here I'm continuing on, so I'll start with A4. I'm still in proximity mode. If you see on the third line in the top, it says proximity mode is on. So I'll go B, F up, G, B down, C, G up, E, D, C, G, D. And so now I've finished the notes. And I want, in this case, I'm going to put an invisible bar line. So MI, measure invisible. So if you don't do that, score will get confused when you do line up and justify, because it'll probably try to push the music off the edge of the staff into the blank space, because it likes to go to 200. But if it sees the bar line, it will stop at 150 for the line up and justify process. So now I will put in the rhythms. So if you notice, there are no rhythms for these notes. It's just black note heads. But we're going to pretend at the moment that the notes are quarter notes. So I'm just going to say Q times 24. And that's all. So in graphical mode, we'll remove the stems. So marks, there are no marks. There is text. You can see P0 and RI5 above, but those will be edited in graphical text in later. So no marks, no beams, and no slurs. And then I won't save what I just typed to a file. And so what we'll do now is we'll edit and clean up that first staff before we continue, just so you can see, because it's kind of its own timeline, and so it's kind of independent. So we'll just clean it up now. So I pressed escape to get out of input mode, so I'm back in command mode, editing graphically. So the first thing I can do is remove all of the stems. So there's an if statement that you can use in score to modify things. So I can say if P1 equals 1, so that means if it's a note, then P5 equals 0. So what this means is if it's a note, then remove the stem. And it will also remove the accidental, so that's why I'm doing the accidentals later. So it's easier to just remove the stems and add the accidentals later, since stems are the tens digit of parameter 5 and the accidentals are the ones digit. So if I press enter, you'll see that the stems on all the notes disappear. So now we have all the note heads with no stems. So now I want to go through the notes and add the accidentals. So the easiest way is I can click on the first note and then continue on, or another way to do it from the command line is to type ST11. So ST means select, and then the first one means select on staff 1. And the second one means which code item, which is notes. So it's a 1 for notes for the second one. So when I press enter, it's going to go to the first note, and then I can type FLT on that note and it'll add a flat. And then I can press enter until I get to the next note with an accidental, which is the F. And then I can type SHP for sharp. And then for the next two, I need to put SHP, and then go to the A and type FLT. So now I'm at the last note in the first 12-tone row. And if you notice in the music that there's a little extra space just to separate the two groups of 12. So the way I did that is by changing the duration of the note from 1 for a quarter note to 2 for a half note. So that's parameter 7. So if you see at the top, parameter 7 is 1.000. So if I type 7 space 2, it'll change it to 2, which means a half note. So I'll press enter. And now you can see at the top row in the 7 column, it's 2 instead of a 1. So when we do LJ command next, it will add a little space because it thinks it's a half note, but it will look like just a black note head with no stem. But the duration of it will be a half note, so there'll be a little bit extra space. So now we'll continue on pressing enter until we get to the G flat, type FLT, and then the next note to B flat is, and then the last 3 are sharp, so SHP. So if you noticed in data entry, I put it in the wrong octave. So in this case, I can just type the up arrow 7 times to get it an octave higher. And then I can type SHP on it. And so now we've added the accidentals. I need to run LJ to give a little bit of extra space between the two groups. So I type LJ and then enter, and then 1 staff, and there's only, the bottom staff is 1 and there's only 1 staff. So I press enter. So this is the area it's going to justify, which is good. So I press enter again to actually do the justification. So now you see it's in its final horizontal position state. So we have a little extra gap in the middle, and then all the accidentals were given extra space. So maybe now I'll put in the text. So the way you put in text in score is you type text, then you give it which staff number to put it on, so 1. And then you give it the horizontal position. So I'll just estimate it'll be like 15 for the one on the left side, or maybe a little bit less, like 10. And then you can also give it a vertical position. So you can either not put the vertical position and move it later, or I know I want to put it a little bit above the staff, so I'll use position 14, which is like 3 steps above the top line of the staff. So now I'll press enter. So it's saying choose the font. So the default will be Times Roman. I always give the font number. So for Times Roman, it's _00 without the plus in front. Or you can click on the bottom. You can see it says 1 times and so that means Times Roman. So you can either press the F1 key or click on that Times Roman button at the bottom. And what that will do is add the _00. So _00 is the font number. So it won't be displayed in the text, and don't put a space after it because it'll be removed just for the font. So if you put a space, you'll add a space to the text, which will move it a little bit to the right, but it doesn't really make sense for the beginning of text because you're going to be moving it around anyway, visually. So now I put in the text, which is a P, -0, and then enter. So you see it got pretty close. I'll type I, enter, to go back to the text, and then I will type CN, which is a command to center the text exactly above the note. So you can do it visually, so it's kind of close. If you like it like that, that's okay. But if you want to put it exactly starting on the note head, then you can do this. And then when I do that, you'll see it will probably move a little bit, probably to the right, to get exactly aligned with the B. See, so it moved a little bit, and if I press escape, you can see that it's there. And I like the vertical position of 14. You could use the arrow keys to move it up or down, or change parameter 4 of the text. So parameter 4 is the vertical position. That's good. So I can either type in a new text for RI5, or I can actually copy this text here. So I'm going to type INC10, just so I can use the arrow key every 10 units, so it takes me less time to move it over. And then I'll press INC1 just to cancel this 10 increment. And now I'll type CN to get it exactly on the A, which it already was pretty much. So I want to change, well, the first thing I'll do is copy the text before I forget, because otherwise we're going to be moving the text and you'll have to go back and put in the P0 again. So I will type, I'll press F3, or you can click on the F3 button at the bottom, which means copy. So now I've made a copy, so I want to change the text. So I can type TX, enter. And I can erase P0 and put in RI5. And then press escape to see the copied value with the new text. And so there it is. So we're almost done. So we can change the bar line at on the left side. So the easiest way, so the problem I've discussed in the previous video is that the bar line and the staff line origin is at the same point. So what I do is I type ST114. So ST means select on staff 1, in this case, all the objects that have the number 14 as their type, which are bar lines. And so it's going to do the first one on the left. There's also an invisible on the right, which we won't be using. So I press enter. And so now I'm at the beginning, and you can see I move it a little bit. You can see the bar line. You can also look at the top left. It says bars. So that means that's the bar line I'm editing and not staff for the staff line. So what you would normally have to do is go into the SCORE reference manual 3.0 and look at chapter 14, which describes bar lines, and see which parameter it is. But if you can use the function, the help function, by pressing F1 or clicking on the F1 help button at the bottom. So this gives you brief information about bar lines. So we can move it up first. So that's called bar extensions. So you can press space to go to P10 and look at the documentation. So it's very terse. So it's better to look at the reference manual at the first time. So this is more of a mnemonic for which parameters you need to change. But if you see, P10 sets the origin or bottom of the bar line. And this will be the horizontal position on the staff. So if you don't give any P10, it'll use the default value of 3, and 3 is the vertical position of the bottom line on the staff. So who knows exactly why, but basically middle C on treble clef was given 1, which is the first ledger line below. So on parameter 10, the origin is the bottom. So we don't want to put it on the bottom, we want to put it on the top. So if you look on the next line for P11, it's saying 11 is the top line of a staff. So once I've seen like the summary of the parameters, now I can go and apply them. So parameter 10 is for the bottom, and that needs to go on the top of the staff, which is vertical position 11. So I type 10 for parameter 10, changing to the top staff, which is position 11. And then for parameter 11, I want to put it on the bottom staff of the next line up. So we're going to have to do two things to do that. So the first thing is I set parameter 11 to be 3, which means the bottom line on the staff, which will be the next staff. So at the moment it'll be referring to the first staff, but we're going to fix it to change it to the second staff. So now I press enter. So those positions are set, but now we need to fix it so it's actually a 2 staff bar line, and that's parameter 4. So parameter 4 is currently set to 1, so it's like 1 staff. But if we say 4 space 2, that'll make it 2 staves. And then the bar line you'll see kind of extending currently into nowhere. And then I'll press escape just to save that so you can see that I moved it off of the staff because parameter 10 was set to 11. And then parameter 11 is set to 3 for a future staff we're going to add. So now the only thing we have left, I'll press I, enter to go back to the bar line. We need to change the bar line style, which is parameter 5, but maybe you don't remember which parameter 5 value is a dash bar line. So we'll go back to help. So I'll press F1. And then if you see bar type is 5, so I go to the parameter 5 documentation and look for the dash bar line, which is 7. So see if P5 equals 7, it's a dash bar line. You can also change the sizes of the dashes and the space between the dashes by changing parameters 8 and 9, but we'll just do the default dashing. So press escape. Now type parameter 5 is equal to 7 by typing 5 space 7 and then enter. So you won't see the dashing because it's showing you the solid line original one, and then the dashing is on top of it. So if you have to press escape to see the dashing. So I press escape and there's the dashing. So that's pretty much the bottom line for the tone row. So now we'll enter the music on staff 2 and 3. So I'll go back into input mode. And it remembered I already did 1, so it's now saying, do you want to put it on staff 2, which I'll do. It remembered the right end was 150. And also I changed the size to 0.75 from the previous example, which remembers since the last edited example. So we're ready to press space. So now we have the second staff. So the first thing is M2 because we'll have another bar line which goes from part 2 to part 3, or staff 2 to staff 3. And then we have a bass clef and then a 4/4. So now what I'm going to do is I'll put in the rest and the first chord. So that will be a B natural 2, C natural 3, F natural, D natural. And I put the colons between the notes and the chords. So maybe there's 2 ways of looking at this music, as you have like one set of chords that are split across the staves, but it'll be simpler just to treat each staff separately. So what I need to do is put an invisible rest, so RI, so that there's a placeholder for the chord that's on the top staff. So now I'll skip to the treble clef, and then I'll put in the second chord on the bottom staff of the music. So I'll do it from top to bottom. So you can go in any direction in a chord. So I'll say G natural 4, and then we have E natural, D natural, and then A flat down. And now we have a measure, so I'll put an M there. And then just for clarity, I'll press enter so we don't have too much line wrap. So now I'm entering the music for measure 2. So it's going to be an invisible rest to have a placeholder for the chord above it in the right hand. So I type a rest invisible, and then a bass clef, and then we have G natural 3, B flat, C natural 4, and E natural. And then we have one more invisible rest for the placeholder for the last note in the top voice, or the top staff, and then a bar line. So now the rhythms are pretty simple. So the placeholders, the first two placeholders are quarter notes, and the last one will be a half note. So there's actually 6 quarter rhythms we have to do. So it's quarter times 6. And then the last invisible rest is a half note, and then semicolon. So there's no marks, beams, or slurs on this staff. So you can type semicolon enter for those 3 steps, or a shortcut is just type G enter to just go to the end. So who knows why G just means G for go or something. And now I'm lazy and don't want to save this because I don't make mistakes. And now we're entering music for the third staff. So all the parameters are the same, so I'll just press space. And now we type the notes. So it's fairly simple, and we'll just have to put invisible rests in to complement the ones on the lower staff. So we have a treble clef, 4/4, and then the first rest is visible. And then we have an invisible rest as a placeholder for the first chord and the bottom staff of the music. And then we put in the first chord on the top staff. So we have F sharp 4, colon, D sharp, C sharp, and then A natural 3. And then we have another invisible rest, and then we have an F sharp 4, A natural, B natural, and F natural up. And then we have an invisible rest, and then we have bass clef, and then we have D sharp 3, G sharp, then we have C sharp 4, and a D natural 4, or 4 is optional. And then that's all, because we already have the bar lines from the lower staff. So here's the notes on the page. Now we add the rhythms, which are the same as on the bottom staffs, because we have all these invisible rests that pair with the chords on the other staff. So it'll be Q times 6 and a half note at the very end. And then enter. And so there are marks in this case. So we have a piano. If you notice, it's not on note 1, so you can put fractional values. So I can put it halfway from the beginning of the music to chord number 1 on the top staff. There's also a crescendo, so that's a C+. And then you give it the 2 notes that it starts and ends on, which is notes 1 and 2, or chords 1 and 2 in this case. So there's some small crescendo above 2. So we can actually, I'll put in like a little dummy crescendo, and then graphically we'll edit and add the second decrescendo in that case. So I do C+, and I'll put that from 2 to 2.1. So a little bit over to the right, because it's just a short one. And I'll put the decrescendo in later, so you'll see that. So that's all I'll do for the marks. So for beams, we don't have anything. So slurs, we have a large slur. We could add that later, or I'll just put it in as from notes 1 to 3. And we'll have to extend the left side so that it matches to the bottom staff notes before. So we'll just do that later in graphical mode. I won't save this. So now we've entered all of the music with input mode, so now we can go and clean things up. So the first thing you should do, which I didn't do already, is to save the file, because if you make a mistake, you're in big trouble if you don't save. So I'll save it to EXER9. So now you see on the left it says exer9.muse, that's the file we're editing, and on the right it says save, so that means that what we see on the screen is what's in the file. So I'll run LJ on the top two staves. So I do LJ. So the lowest staff is 2, and there's 2 staves to align. So I'll type 2 space 2 and then enter. And then I'll press enter again to actually do the lineup and justification. So now we have the music basically where it should go, and we have to do just a few cleanups on the slurs and the crescendos. So maybe we'll start with the slur first. So what I'm going to do is click on the left side of the slur, and then either click on the MOVLF 4 button at the bottom, or type function key F4 to just move the left end. So I'm just doing that, and then I'm just using the arrow keys to get it roughly where I want it to end. And I will put it about there, maybe a little bit to the left. If you notice, it's going through the stem, so I can actually type option 7 to use the arrow key to move the curvature. So I'm just editing parameter 7 by typing on a Mac option 7. So if you see on the right, there's some yellow highlighted text which is saying P7 increment is 1.0. So we're editing just parameter 7 using arrow keys, and every keystroke is 1 vertical unit. So I can graphically get it about where I want it to be. So that's where I want it to go, and I'll press escape to get out of editing just parameter 7 visually with the arrow keys. And then I can use parameter 10 and have it a little bit offset so it kind of makes it steeper on the left and a little bit shallower on the right side. So that's parameter 10, which you can look up on the parameter sheet. It doesn't always look so great to use this, but I think in this case it's so extreme it should be okay. So you see it kind of offset the center of the slur, so the peak is at 35% instead of 50%. And I'll press escape to see what we do, and I think that's reasonably good. So now we'll edit the long crescendo. So it's basically in the right place, but if you notice, it's a little bit narrow at the opening on the right. So that is parameter 7 for the lines, or crescendos in this case. So I can say 7, 3 to have it 3 steps wide at the right side. And, or maybe to match the notation, maybe change it to 4. So that's pretty close to the original. And then maybe move it down a little bit. So you have more space from the stem. So that looks pretty good. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take this little crescendo I added in input mode. I'm going to zoom in with Z4, enter, and then move it above, and then move it a little bit back. And then I'm going to change the length so it's a little bit longer. So I'm going to type function key 5, or click on the move right button on the bottom. And I'll use the right arrow key to make it a little longer. So probably that's good enough. And then I want to close the opening on the right side. So that's parameter 7 again. So maybe we'll try 1, which is a pretty good size. So that looks good for that crescendo. So I'm going to press escape to save it, or escape to get out of moving the right, or the right side, and then press escape to get out of editing it again. And just to see it without that extra crescendo at the bottom. And now I'm going to type I, enter, and I'm going to move this crescendo and put like 1 space between them. And then I'm going to change the parameter 7 from +1 to -1. So that'll make it a decrescendo. So I'll say 7 -1. But it's -1 maybe has a special meaning. So maybe like -0.99. So it's almost identical. So I have to copy it. So press F3 or press the copy button. If you don't, you're going to be moving your crescendo and you'll have to go put it back. So if I want to exactly match, so they're slightly off, so I'll just say 7 0.99. So now they have the exact same height, even though you probably wouldn't see a 1% difference. And so if I zoom out, the music is getting close to done. So I think the only thing we have to do is put the tempo marking at the beginning of the staff 3. So to do that, we'll use text again. So text command, and then we give it the staff number to put it on, which is 3. The horizontal position, which will be about 8, because it's a little bit before P0. And then you can give it a vertical position, so I can match the vertical position of the P0, which was 14. And then press enter, and then choose the font. So you can click on button 1 on the bottom, or you can put _00 for Times Roman, and then M. So to type an A umlaut, you have to look at chapter 16. So text is chapter 16. Also, the parameter sheet I gave you on the back, there's a list of all the keyboard shortcuts for accented characters, so you can look there as well. So for an umlaut, you put %A, so that makes an umlaut, and then type the rest of the word, and then a space, and then you also have to look at the text chapter to see how to write a quarter note, or look at the parameter table I showed you in class, or gave you in class. So a quarter note, you type a open square bracket. So that's, you just, if you use score a lot, you might remember it, but otherwise you have to go look and see how do you type a quarter note, and that's a quarter note. Equals 120. So that's the text. So I can press enter, and it added it, and pretty much where I wanted to put it. So maybe for the musical, like the tempo marking, we might want to make it a little larger than the text like P0 and RI5, because it's more important and it's usually a little bit bigger. So I can go back to the text, and right now the size is 10.17, or point size. So if I want to make it point size 12, I can type PT space 12. So what, this is not a real parameter, it's basically like a program is going to convert it into the size scaling. So when I press enter, you'll see that one of the numbers up at the top will change, either 5 or 6. So we'll see. So I'll press enter. And so now you see parameter 6 went to 1.18, which is the scaling factor that gets you point size 12. And then if I press escape, you can see the music. Maybe that's a little extreme, so I'll change it to point size 11. So it's slightly larger than the text, but not too large. So that's point size 11. So we have just one more thing to do, which is to add the curly brace on the left. So I type ST214 and then say 5.8 for the parameter, and then copy with F3. So I've already demonstrated that in the previous video, but so you see if I don't talk about all this, I can type it pretty fast. So this is pretty much the final result for example 9.